Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Very glad to be with you.
Now, in your book, The Bully Pulpit, the actual period that you're starting off with, the early 1900s, is also the era where the sort of birth, if you like, of local government, of city managers in the USA. So it's a really important period for the folks here at this conference.
Yeah, I mean, what had happened is after the Industrial Revolution really took hold and cities were being expanded exponentially, and political bosses were in control of cities, and in a lot of corrupt web of invisibles nature with the criminal class below and the business community above, something had to be done, it seemed, for a better government of the cities. And so in this period, the progressive movement included people saying, well, what if we have city managers that are appointed? What if we have commissions that are nonpartisan? Then maybe we get away from the corruption that is endemic in our cities. So it was a very exciting, adventurous time in American politics because the problems were big, but there were groups of people all over the country saying, we can handle them, we can make things better. And thus, the city manager movement was born, ICMA was born, so it's pretty exciting.
But some of the problems that you talk about, some of the issues that you talk about in the book, you could say exist still today. So are there still the people around today who are saying we can tackle this, we can handle this?
Yeah, you've got to believe that just as the Industrial Revolution created a change in the economy, people moving from farms to cities, huge numbers of inventions changing the pace of life, as the technological revolution has done today and globalization, and people sometimes feel like we're in the grips of something that we can't change. But these people felt that way then, and yet there were numbers of people in the settlement house, in the churches, in politics, who said, no, problems created by men can be changed by men. And they did indeed soften the worst aspects of the industrial order. So you got to still hope that people can feel today with this dysfunction in Washington that maybe the cities and the states are where we have to look for experimentation, for taking hold of the problems, because they have to deal with them every day. They can't simply say, no, I'm not going to vote on this issue. So that happened in the progressive era too. A lot of the federal legislation that later came under Theodore Roosevelt had already been tried in the cities and the states.
What are some of the tools then, do you think, that city managers and others like them have at their disposal or they can use to try in the way that you suggest?
Well, you know, what you would hope, I mean, leadership is at the core of it all, you know, so that sharing from one city manager to another what made things work in one city. And that's what's so great about these kind of conventions, because you're not alone. You know, you don't have to go through the whole wheel again. If somebody's experimented with the schools or with the finance or the fire department, whatever it is, maybe there's a better way of doing it, and you can learn from your fellow people. And so that's why I think coming together collectively makes a big difference.
One of the main tenets of your book is the role of the press in all this, and the president's relationship with the press. A lot of those papers, you know, are no more. Those magazines are no more. There aren't the investigative journalists that there used to be.
You know, what worries me is that what really made the progressive movement possible were there were a series of golden investigative journalists who are still famous today, who would study the corruption of the cities, who would study what was going on with the monopolies, the meatpacking plants, the lack of workmen's compensation in the factories, and they'd write these 10,000-word pieces in national magazines, and people would read them and actually gobble them up and talk to people about them, and then force a reluctant Congress to act. Nowadays, of course, there are still investigative journalists, but would somebody, as the guy here did, McClure, give them 2 years to do their research, and then they produce 10 or 30,000 word pieces? Would people read them? Our attention span is so limited between the blogs and the internet and Facebook and television. Journalists have many audiences they have to answer to today. And even if they produce these pieces, breaking news comes in for some other issue. So it worries me that we don't have that concentrated attention that was true at this time. When the public gets mobilized, when they care about an issue, then that's the way things change. That's what happens in a democracy. I mean, Lincoln once said, with public sentiment, anything is possible. Without it, nothing is possible. And so it's public sentiment we have to educate today in the cities, the states, and the country as a whole.
Well, thank you ever so much for talking to us. Really appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome.